Okay, this lesson is going to go over all of the techniques that you're going to need to know for the midterm exam. The first thing that we're going to go over is how to create a new composition. When you open up After Effects, you're just going to click on New Project, and there's a couple ways you can create a new composition. You can go up top and hit Composition, New Composition. You can hit Control N on your keyboard, or you can come down here to this little box and hit New Composition. Once you click on it, you can rename the composition, change the settings. 1920 by 1080 is good, and then you can change the time down here. Yours might say something like 30 seconds, which is way too long for what we're going to create. So you can change it by going to 10 seconds. We're probably only going to use 5 seconds, so whatever you want to change it to. 10 seconds is fine here. Background color does not matter. And then you just click OK. The next thing that we're going to talk about once we have a new composition is creating a background. Right now there is no background here. There's nothing in this composition. And to check that, we can just click on this toggle transparency grid, and we see that there's really nothing there. There's no layers here in the timeline. So what you want to do is just click on the rectangle tool up here by double clicking on it. You can see it's going to bring up the settings from the last time that you used a shape layer. The last time I used a shape layer, I had no fill and I had a pretty thick stroke on it, 42 pixels wide. But if I click on this transparency grid again, I can see it's just the stroke. There's nothing in the middle here. That's not what we want for a background. So to change these settings, you're just, if I don't want a stroke on it, which I don't for a background, you're going to click on the word stroke, and then these options are going to come up: radial gradient, linear gradient, solid color, or none. Click on none. That'll take the stroke off. Same thing for the fill. If we click on fill, we have the same options here. I always like a radial gradient for your background, so I'm going to click radial gradient. And then to choose the colors, I can click on the actual box, the fill color, and it gives me all these color options, and I can change them independent from one another. This would be the color in the middle, and this would be the outer color. You can start with a light color and go to dark, or vice versa, dark to light. I am going to start with a light gray, and you just click on that little box to change that color. And then for the outer color, I'll go with a darker gray, something like that, and click OK. You want your gradient to be the same color palette. So you want it to be in the same range. So if it's gray, you want 2 shades of gray. Red, 2 shades of red. You don't want it to be something like red on the outside, gray in the middle. 2 completely different colors. If I drag that out, you see it, not great to look at. So I'm just going to make them 2 different shades of the same color. Start with that light gray, end with a darker gray, hit OK, and then you can pull this handle out to something that looks nice like that, and there you go. You have yourself a background. I would rename the layer. To rename layers, just click on it, hit enter, and then we'll call it BG for background. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is working with shape layers. So we have ourselves a background here. Now if I wanted to create a shape on top of this, like as a separate layer to put on top of this background, I want to make sure that I'm not highlighted on any layers down here in the timeline. So you can see right now I'm highlighted on this background layer. If I brought a shape in right now, if I double clicked, it would add this shape to this same layer, and that is not what we want. We want it to be its own separate layer so we can manipulate it separately from the background. So I'm just going to hit Control Z, and if I just make sure that nothing's highlighted here, then if I click on a shape layer, it's going to bring it in as a separate layer. And so now if I change the color on this layer to something like red, and we can change it to a solid color. And we'll go there. And now if I make it smaller, you can see that that shape is its own separate entity, its own separate layer. To get different shapes, if you just click and hold up here on the rectangle, you have these different options: a rounded rectangle tool, ellipse, basically a circle, polygon, star tool. So again, if I double click there, I have another shape layer, and I can resize it just by pulling in on the handles, and I can move it around with my mouse if it's highlighted, or down here under transform, I can change the position, or I can use the arrow keys on my keyboard to move it a little bit with more precision, I guess. Now, you see this little crosshair looking thing? That's the anchor point. So on your shape layer, if you were going to animate it, like if I go to the scale of this shape layer, make it smaller, you can see that it's going in towards this anchor point here, this little crosshair looking thing. If I want to animate something, I don't know, from the corner, I can change the position of the anchor point right here under anchor point. If nothing is open, if you just hit A, that'll bring up the anchor point, and I can move it, I don't know, let's say here, and then if I hit P, that'll bring back up the position. And now if I want to scale this thing, it's going to scale relative to this anchor point. So if I go to S for scale and I make it smaller, it's now going in towards that anchor point. Okay, if you want the anchor point to be in the center, make sure that your layer is highlighted and just hit Control Alt Home at the same time, and that will bring it to the center of that layer. All right, so that's creating shape layers. The next thing that we're going to talk about is text layers. So to create a new text layer, I can just click on this T up here and then click anywhere on my composition, and it's going to bring up this cursor, and I can type whatever. Or you can go down here, right click, new text layer. Okay. Just talk real quick. I'm going to get rid of these two. By the way, once you have a text layer, like if I have something written here and I want to like move this around or something, you can see that my cursor still has that text layer icon there. So if I want to like click on this and try and move it, it's just going to create an empty text layer. We want to make sure that the direct selection tool is highlighted, and now we can move that around. Okay, I'm going to get rid of these here, and we're just going to make a new text layer, and it's going to say bar. And then let's talk about some of the different things that you can do with this layer. So again, you see the anchor point is up here in the top left-hand corner. If I want to put that to the middle, Control Alt Home. And then to align it, let's say if I want to find the dead center, if we have snapping on up here, snapping checked, it's going to snap to the center there. If I don't have that on, or a different way to get it into the center is just go to Align up here and hit the horizontal center and the vertical center, and there you go. If you don't have this Align window over here, to add windows, you can just go over here to Window. If I uncheck that and then check it again, there it is. It might appear up here or something when you bring it into your window, your editing window. And to move that, we're just going to click and drag it over here. There you go. All right, let's talk about the different things you can do with the text. If you click on character, again, if you don't have that window, just go to Window, Character. When you look at your window for character, it might just look like that, where we can change the font type And if I have this layer selected and then just scroll up and down with my mouse, it will change live and I can get a preview of what that's going to look like. I can change the color of it. Again, we have two different options here, the fill color and the stroke color. Right now there's no stroke on it. If I wanted to put a stroke on it, click on this box behind and double click on it, and then I can pick a color for the stroke, hit OK. Now if I want to change anything about the font itself, you need to bring up, just widen the character window. To do that, just scroll, hover your mouse at the bottom of that window, click and drag it down, and now I can make it bigger. If I want the stroke to be thicker, it's right here under pixels, PX for pixels, and I can make that thicker, whatever I think looks good. And then you have more options down here. If I want it to be wider, I can widen it out, or taller. I can make it taller or shorter. I can make the space between the letters bigger or smaller. I can cram it together, make it wider. This would be if you had two different lines, the space between those lines. So if I drop down and hit another, have some more text here, and then I can make the space between those lines greater. And that's pretty much it. So there's the text layer tools, and here you can pick if it's regular, bold. Some fonts have the ability to be bold or italicized, whatever. All right, so there is working with text layers. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about is trim paths with shape layers. So right now I want to add a new shape layer, make sure that nothing is selected down here in the timeline, and I want to add a rectangle. So I'm just going to double click on the rectangle. It brings up a rectangle as big as my composition. Now, let's say I want to outline something. Okay, so if I brought in a text layer, and again, we'll just say Debar, and we'll center that up. If I wanted to outline this text with my shape layer, because we're going to talk about trim paths, which is good for outlining and animating outlines of things. Here's the problem. If I just go to this shape layer, and let's say I want no fill, right, because I just want it to be an outline. So I'm going to click on the word fill, go to none, and I want the stroke. Whoops. I want a stroke, solid color, maybe not that thick, so I'm going to change it up here to something like 17. So you can see now it's the same thickness all the way around. That's good. But if I want to make this a little bit smaller, and I click on this shape layer and I resize it to something like that, you can see what happens to the stroke, right? The fill. It's thicker on the sides and it's a lot thinner on top, and it doesn't look very good. So what you want to do, if you want to outline something, or if you just want to create a specific shape, we're going to draw it out. So I'm just going to get rid of this, backspace, and I'm going to bring up the grid, and you can see right here where it says choose grid and guide options. If I click on that and I bring up the grid, now it brings up this nice grid, and I'm going to go to the pen tool now, which is just a different way to make a shape layer. We can make any type of shape layer that we want. So what I want to do is use this grid, and I'm just going to draw an outline here. Get as close as we can. And now we can see, if I turn off that grid, now we have a stroke that's, the same thickness all the way around. I can center that up. If I go to a line, there we go, and now it's perfectly centered around that object. All right, let's talk about trim paths here. Trim paths are awesome. They work with any shape layer. I'm just going to open up this shape layer here, and where it says Add, click on Add and go to Trim Paths. And it's going to bring up this other menu in here. To work with trim paths, I can just open up this menu, and what you're going to want to focus on, well, all three actually, start, end, and offset. So if we want to animate this path, we can do so easily by messing with and keyframing the start and the end. But let's say we want this thing to animate in, we want the line to like shoot up from the center both directions. So right now we can't do that because it's starting over here in the corner. So if we animated this, let's say we animated the start there, and then we moved out and brought it there. Now we see that our animation is from the corner, and maybe we don't want that, right? So just going to hit Control Z to undo that, and we're going to mess with the offset. So if I move this a little bit and then mess with the offset, I can see it changes where that's going to start. So if I put the end right there in the center and then make this 0 again, now we can see it's going to start from the center, right? And that's what we want. Actually, let's put it on the bottom here. All right. So now if I go to, it should be right around 50%, right? I go to 50% with the start, and then 50% with the end, and click the stopwatch to hit the keyframes, and then drag out, I don't know, somewhere in here, and then I go to 0. It's going to end right there and go to, 100. And now that's a lot better, a lot more visually interesting than starting from the corner. Okay, so there's trim paths. You can do a lot of different things with trim paths. Again, trim paths work with all layers. So if I wanted to bring in a circle and add a trim path layer and open up those options, again, same thing. I can animate that circle, and you can see this could be used for a lot of different things, right? So there you go. There's trim paths, which you will need to know for the midterm. All right, we're going to talk about keyframing now, and specifically easing or easing your keyframes to make it look a little bit better. We've all worked with keyframes. We're pretty familiar with it, but we aren't probably as familiar with using the graph editor and making our keyframes look a little bit smoother, a little bit better. So what I'm going to do, create a new text layer, and again, just make this my name, and I'll take the stroke off of this thing. Oops, make sure that that's highlighted, no stroke. All right, and I'm going to change the anchor point to the center by hitting Control Alt Home, and we're going to align this to the center. Boom. All right, so let's animate this. Very simple animation. I'm just going to change the scale of it. I'm going to animate the scale of it. So I can go open up this window and go to Transform, and it brings up all of these things that I can change, and here's scale. Or I can just click on the layer and hit S for scale. I'm going to set a keyframe here and make it 0. And instead of trying to do that with the mouse, I hit Control Z. If I just click on that, hit 0, enter, there you go. And then let's make this about a half a second long, and we're going to go 100%. There you go. So if I look at this, it goes from 0 to 100. So let's talk about easing our keyframes. By the way, to find the keyframes, all of the keyframes, let's say you have some effects on this layer and you've keyframed those effects and all of that stuff. To get all of the keyframes for a layer, I'm just going to hit U, and it will bring up those keyframes. Now, let's zoom in on this. You can see these the keyframes right now look like diamonds. That lets you know that they're just linear keyframes. They haven't been eased at all. So to ease them, you're just going to highlight both keyframes, right-click, Keyframe Assistant, and click Easy Ease. Or you can hit F9, and that will automatically do that. So now, you can see it's a little bit different. It eases into that animation, and that looks a little bit better than that, right? Whoops, so let's redo that. Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. All right, now we're going to work with the graph editor really quickly. So there's two different types of graphs you can work with. Right here is the graph editor. If you just click on graph editor, it brings up, these are what the keyframes look like in graph format. See, it's going from 0 to 100. To 100 right here, and it's doing it in a smooth kind of fashion. So because we eased these keyframes, it's starting out, this is a speed graph, by the way. It's starting out slow, getting fast, and then slowing down, easing into that 100%. So what we want to do to make it a little bit more interesting, and you're going to need to do this on your midterm, is change the graph here. So let's first talk about the value graph. Right now we're on speed graph. Right here, if you want to change the graph, you can click down here where it says choose graph type and options. And we'll go up to value graph. Right now we're on speed graph. This is how fast the animation happens. We want to change the value of the animation. So edit value graph. And you can see it goes from 0 up to 100%. But what might look a little bit cooler if we just highlight this keyframe and we take this handle, click on it, and drag it up. You can see right now this is 100%. So we want it to go a little bit past 100% and then back down to 100%. So it's like a bounce, right? And I can change how much over 100% we go. We can go up to 150 and then back to 100, whatever. I'm just going to go a little bit above 100 and then back down. So now to get out of this, you're just going to click back on the graph editor logo. By the way, to change, let's zoom back out here. To change our work area, so it doesn't, if I hit spacebar, it would just keep going all the way to 10 seconds since our composition is 10 seconds long. So if I want to click right here and drag this into about, I don't know, 1 second. So now this playhead's only going to go to 1 second and then loop back around to 0 again. So let's look at this animation. And that was really quick. So if I wanted to drag this out, let's say to here. There you go. You can see it's getting bigger, a little bit past 100 and then snapping back to 100%. And that just looks a little bit better. We can mess with this keyframe here. Good. There you go. So there's the value graph. Speed graph, let's talk about that. Again, I'm going to highlight both keyframes, click on the graph editor, change from value to speed graph. And you can see the speed graph has changed since we messed with the value. So let's say, I think in animation, a good tip is to always bring things onto the screen as fast, maybe not as fast as possible, but fast, and then slow them down into their final destination. So here's the beginning. If we just highlight this keyframe and drag it towards the beginning, that's going to speed up. You can see the line gets steeper, which means it's going faster. And then grab this handle down here and we'll slow it down. So it's going to come in really fast and then slow down at the end. So I'm going to get out of the graph editor, hit play. You can see it, boom, it jumps in there real quick and then slows down. And maybe we don't want it to be that big, so I'll go back to the value graph and grab this handle and we'll just change it a little bit so it's not as big at the end. All right, let's see what that looks like. Boom. Looks a little bit better, and I can even change it more. There you go. Boom. So that animation is a lot more interesting, visually appealing than just two linear keyframes, 0 to 100, right? So you're going to need to know how to do that. All right, the next thing that we're going to talk about is adding some effects, and there's so many different effects that you can use in After Effects. We're just going to talk about two here that might look good and that I'm going to want you to use on the midterm. So to add effects over here, you're just going to go to Effects and Presets, and let's just get rid of that. Here's all of the options, and again, there's so many of them. The two that we're going to talk about are Drop Shadow and Light Sweep. You know, pretty simple, easy effects, and they look pretty good. So to find any effect here, you can just click inside the search window and type it out, or know where they are. I'm just going to type in Drop Shadow, and you can see I hit drop, or typed in drop, and it came up. So I'm just going to drag this onto this text layer, and now we have these controls that pop up here that we can animate. For Drop Shadow, it's really your preference, but some of the things that I think look good, 5 is a good distance, I guess. We want to make that a little bit bigger, so we can control the distance that drop shadow is away from our text, and the angle. We can change the angle of that drop shadow. I don't know if we wanted to make it all the way down at the ground, whatever. I'm going to leave this angle right about there and change it to something like that. Now, it's a really harsh shadow. There's, definite defined edges to it. We want to control the softness of that, and we can do that right here. We'll just soften that out a little bit. And then what might look a little bit better is to throw another drop shadow on that same layer. And we'll leave this one here. We won't change the softness, and I don't know, we'll bring maybe 3. So if we zoom in here, we can see, well, let's make it like, I don't know, 6. So now you can see we have a really hard defined shadow and then a softer one behind it. We can maybe change the softness of that to like 7. I don't know. So now that drop shadow looks a little bit better, eh? That's pretty much it with drop shadow. You can keyframe any of these things that you want, so the drop shadow comes in after. I don't know, that might look cool, might not. So let's get to the end of this animation. If we want to make the, let's get rid of this second drop shadow. No. If I want to take the distance down to 0 and this distance to 0 and change the softness, we will keyframe the softness as well. There you go. Now we have no real drop shadow here. And then if we want the drop shadow to come out, then we can animate this drop shadow, something like 25, soften it up, 60, and then this one to be like that, and the softness to be like 10. Okay, so now we have that drop shadow animating. So there's the text, and the drop shadow comes in afterwards. You're not going to have to animate the drop shadow, but anytime you see these stopwatches, they're going to be, oh, I didn't keyframe that softness on that first one. So if I go here and click that to 0, and then let me see the keyframes here. Go here and make that 60. I can take these and widen them out a little bit. can extend my work area a little bit. So there you go. There's drop shadow. Okay, the other effect that we're going to talk about is light sweep, which I think is a pretty good looking effect to add, especially to text. I think it's under generate. Yeah, if you go under generate here in the effects and presets, you're going to see that CC light sweep, or you can just go up here and type in light. That'll bring up all the effects that have the word light on it. If you don't want to look through all those, light sweep. There you go, CC light sweep. If we grab that and drag it onto our text layer, you're going to get some, here are the effect controls up here. So the center, this is what you're going to eventually keyframe or animate, but you can see the controls that we have here. We can change, you can see this light right here. As I move the center horizontally, left and right, you can see that light sweeping across, and you can change the angle of it. So if we want it to go in like a 45-degree angle, and you can move them around on the screen as well. So let's see. All right. So you can see the center, if we keyframe this, we're going to get a nice sweep of light across our text, given that 3D looking thing. So we can mess with the settings here. The width of it we can change. We can make it thicker, and you can see that light getting thicker. We can also, the sweep intensity, we can make it brighter. You know, that doesn't look as good in my opinion. You know, it just looks like a white bar going across the letters. Doesn't look as much like a light. The edge intensity, so if we increase the sweep intensity and then the edge intensity, you can see just on the edges of that, of the letters in here, changing as I move that. And edge thickness, so we can make it thicker on the edge of that white line. And we can change the color of the light itself. So, you know, I don't know, maybe you have a colored light or something in your composition, maybe this color. So it might be beneficial for you to do that. But there you go. I'm just going to get rid of that, bring in the light sweep again, and all we're going to do here, we're going to change the angle to something like 45, and we're going to start it over here so you can't see the light, right? And we will keyframe the center, or hit the stopwatch to keyframe the center. We'll move the playhead out a little bit, and we'll just bring this across. If I don't want this to move, let's just Control Z that. If I want it to move perfectly horizontal, I'm just going to drag it over here. I want to make sure that that light gets all the way across the letters. And now we have something that looks like that. And that may be way too fast. So if we open up the effect light sweep, we can control these keyframes, or an easy way is just to highlight the layer, hit U, that'll bring up all the keyframes. Let's make this a little bit longer, and we will use Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease. That might look a little bit better. There you go. That might still be a little too fast. It's your personal preference at this point. There you go. There's a nice, easy looking light sweep. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about with After Effects is rendering the composition or exporting what you created in After Effects. So right now, my composition is 10 seconds long. I zoom out there. You can see if I hit the space bar, there's my animation, and that takes about 2 seconds. But I still have like 8 seconds of this composition where nothing is happening. So if I don't want any of that, what if I just move this, the work area, the end of the work area here, if I move that, click and drag it to like there, I'm only going to be exporting what's in this work area, right? So if I hit spacebar, you can see the playhead doesn't go past 2 seconds, and that's all that I'm going to be editing. Additionally, if I really wanted to, I can trim the layers here. If I click on a layer and hit Alt N bracket, it's going to cut that layer to wherever the playhead is. But I'm going to want, you know, like a second or two after the animation for it to just stay on the screen before, you know, if I use it in a video or whatever. I'm going to want, you know, I don't want it to end as soon as the animation is over. So I'm going to give it like an extra second and a half. And then I can trim these layers down, Alt N bracket, highlight the next one, Alt N bracket, highlight the next one, Alt N bracket. So it looks something like that. You can see that little bit of black there means that my work area is a little bit longer than these layers are. Like if I zoomed in, you can see that the work area goes a little bit past where those layers are. Zoom back out. All right, so now I'm ready to export. All I have to do here, make sure that this area down here, this timeline is selected, and go up to Composition and Add to Render Queue. It's going to open up my render queue, and there's a bunch of stuff that I can change here. All that you're going to need, we can save it as an AVI file because Premiere will recognize the AVI file. If you were done and if this is all you were going to use, you weren't going to use whatever you created in Premiere, you could change this to an MP4 and export it straight from there. So it could play, you know, you could upload it to YouTube or whatever. I'm just going to click here, change the name of it. You know, I can change this to whatever, Jabbar intro, hit save, and it's going to save to the desktop or wherever I told it to save, and then I can just hit render. And there you go. It didn't take very long. Now if I get out of here, I can see I have that AVI file, this animation, which I can easily drag into Premiere. All right, now we're going to talk about working with Premiere, and this is all review. The first thing that we're going to talk about is green screening. So obviously you're going to need some green screen footage. So bring in whatever green screen footage that you have. And I have that. Okay, green screening, the first thing you want to do with any video before you drag it into the timeline is preview it, so you can set an in and out point. This one's already been trimmed, but to set an in point, obviously you're just going to drag the playhead to wherever you want the in point to be, hit I for in, and drag the playhead to wherever you want it to stop, hit O for out, and then if you want the video and audio with it, you can drag it from the video itself down into the timeline. If you want just the video, you would just grab video only, or just the audio only. But it really doesn't matter right now. We're just going to grab the video because we don't need the audio for green screening. So green screening, you got your green screen footage there. You go to Video Effects, down to Keying. We're going to grab Ultra Key, click, drag it onto the clip, and now we're going to find the effect controls. If yours don't show up right here, hit this little button, Effect Controls. You might have to re-click on the clip. This if I close up Alt key, all of this stuff here are the effect controls for any video. Once you put an effect on it, it will be underneath all that stuff. So we have Alt key here. The first thing that you need to do is get rid of the green, take the eyedropper, get rid of the green, and now we got to clean this up a little bit. So under matte cleanup, we're going to take the contrast up to 100 and the midpoint up to 100. And if yours isn't perfect, that's okay. It's a little bit better if you do it in After Effects, but we're not going to worry about it. So that should be all you need to do for green screen. And then if you have some sort of video that you can drop underneath it, let me just grab some random video here. See what that looks like. So there's the video behind it. Obviously, you can still move the position of this video, and you can see this isn't the greatest video with green screen behind it because we have a lot of shadows in here. You could go into matte generation and try and work with those shadows a little bit, and that might help. But as you can see, when I do that, I lose a little bit in the shirt. So it's just not good footage. But anyways, all that I want to know on the midterm is that you can successfully take green screen out of the video. So there you go, green screening. All right, the next thing that we're going to work with is the audio, or I guess audio slash setting keyframes, because we're going to do both here. So to bring in the audio, just double click here in your project panel, and then grab the audio music from wherever you have it saved. I have some desktop under music, and we're just going to drag this right into the timeline because we want the whole thing in there, and spacebar to play it. Actually, okay, the next thing we're going to talk about in Premiere is working with audio and fading in and fading out. So to do that, you're just going to bring in whatever audio music you have. You can do that right here in the project panel. Double click, and I have some music in this folder called Music. Double click that, and then I'm going to preview that before I bring it into the timeline because I don't want this beginning section. And again, I'll hit I for in, O for out, and then I'll just drag the audio in. Hit spacebar to play. Okay, and then let's say I want this to fade in at some point or fade out. I want the first, I don't know, 5 seconds of this to be at full volume, and then I want it to fade out. So again, we're going to go to Effect Controls. Make sure the playhead is where you want this effect to start, the fading to start, and then go to Effect Controls. I have to click on the clip again, and we're just going to set a keyframe with this button here, Add Remove Keyframe. So it's still at 100%, and then let's just drag this, I don't know, 10, 12 frames ahead, and we'll click and just drag this down to like 23, something like that. We still want the music to be heard, but maybe we have some audio that we're going to play over it. So we just want it to be softer. And then if I take this back and hit spacebar to play, there you go. And maybe that's a little too slow. Maybe you want it to go directly from full volume to that negative 23. So if I zoom in here, I can drag that keyframe like something like that. Now it'll sound like this. Okay, that might be a little bit better. That might be what you want. And then let's say at the end here, right around here, we want it to get back to full volume. So I will drag this timeline back out so I can see the playhead there. And we'll set another keyframe. So now from here to here, it's going to be all negative 23. And then maybe a couple frames after that, we want it to go back to 0 or full volume. And so it'll be like this. There you go. That would be fading in and fading out audio. Okay, the next thing that we're going to talk about in Premiere is making a title / background. We'll take care of both here. So we have our thing green screened out. If we don't have video that we want to play behind this and we just want to use whatever's in Premiere to make a background behind it, we can easily do that. Just go up here to title at the top, new title, default still. And you can name it here, and we can name this background. Okay. And we can just ignore everything except this right here where it says background. We'll just check that on. And again, solid color is good. I would go for radial gradient, but for the sake of time, let's just do a solid white. And there it is. It's the exact size of our video. So we can just X that out. It's automatically in our project panel. There it is, background. And so now I want to lift this video up so that the background's behind it. And we can just drag that right in there and it'll snap to the playhead. And there you go. We have a white background. And again, this isn't the greatest because we still have some shadowing over here, but it does the job. So now, I don't even need get rid of okay. So there we go. Enough. I don't even need the audio on. So if I just hit the space bar, you can see we have ourselves a background. There you go. That's making backgrounds in Premiere. Okay, another thing we're going to work with in Premiere is titles, I guess, within the background. So what we can do, go up to title, new title, default still, and we can name this text, whatever. And we're not going to have a background here, so let's go to our text tool, which is over here, type tool, I guess they're calling it. And we'll just click here and we will type in, well, it looks like it might be white, so we're going to change that color to black. And we'll type in video broadcast journalism. Let's see here. And we can move that around with this direct selection tool here. We can, I believe, center this up. That's good. And if we want to mess with the space between these two lines, it might be leading. There we go. And then I can position that anywhere I want. And I can just X out and drop that text right on top there. And there you go. And now, any changes that I make to this will automatically update in the timeline. So if I open this back up and say I don't like that font, or I want it to be a little bit bigger, I can make it bigger, and maybe I'll make it bold. And there we go. And you can see it updating here. And let's say I want it, yeah, that's good. That's good there. So we X that out. Now to animate text, it's very similar, very easy, very similar to After Effects. If we just click on that text, we bring up the effect controls here. And let's say we want it to start at nothing. So we're going to set a keyframe and make that 0. And then maybe let's move this keyframe to like right here, and then I don't know, 2 or 3 keyframes after that, it's going to be 100. So hit the space bar. There it is. So that's keyframing in Premiere. It's obviously better to do in After Effects. You have more control, more options with the keyframing than you do in Premiere, but an easy, quick way to do that here in Premiere. Okay. Another thing that we're going to talk about with Premiere is throwing transitions in there. And if you just had like video to video, like this clip to another video clip, jump cut's probably fine. See how there's no transition here, it just goes straight from this intro animation to this video clip. That's probably fine if it's video to video, but when you have like an intro animation to video, you might want to throw a transition in there, make it look a little bit nicer. So to do that, you're just going to, instead of video effects, you're going to go over video transitions. Couple things I want to mention. One, we want the transition to go over both the intro and the video, this intro animation and the video. So they're on the same track. You see that? Like if this intro animation was down here and I tried to put a video effect or a video transition like page peel or something on it, you can see it's only covering the end of that intro. It's not going on to this title background. So if we played that, it would look like that, and then the video would show up. So we don't want that. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to move this up so it's on the same track as the video. And now if we hold this down, you can click, hold it down, and drag it. You can see it's covering both the intro and that green screen video clip. Okay, so now we'll drop that out, and we get a message here called insufficient media. The transition will contain repeated frames. Basically what you want to do, click OK, just drag this background out past the animation, or past the transition, I should say. So now we have that white background and it's getting to the video. Right? So if this was here, it would turn the page to black and then that would show up. We want to drag that out here, and we might even shorten this page peel a little bit. To do that, you're just going to click or hover your mouse at the end of that transition, click and drag it towards the center of those two. And so now we have something like this, which is cool, right? And then we probably want to throw some other kind of transition. I don't know, there's a bunch of them. Well, let's try this Venetian blinds. Okay. Again, we'll drag the background there. So, I don't know. And there's some effect controls that you can control with these transition. You can change the angle of the blinds. So, there you go. But using transitions from video to graphics, probably a good idea. And something that you're going to have to do on the midterm. The intro that you create in After Effects, you'll have to have some sort of transition from the intro onto the video, and then vice versa at the end, from the video back onto the outro. All right, so there you go. Okay, another thing that we are going to talk about in Premiere is some more keyframing things, but and you can do this in After Effects. Actually, it's a little bit better in After Effects, but if we bring in the intro that we made here, and I think we rendered it out. Bring this in. There's our intro. And let's say we want to use that again at the end, but we want it to go in reverse. Very simple, easy way to do that. If we just go up here and hit Edit, Copy, then take the timeline out here, past everything, hit Edit, Paste, and okay, there we go. And now maybe we want this, instead of animating like an intro again, we want it to reverse the animation. If we just click on that clip, bring up the effect controls, click on that clip, right click on it, and go to speed duration, and we can click reverse speed, hit OK, and so now we have it going in reverse. So here we have it like animating in. We have our video that we've green screened out with some titles, and then we have it animating out. And there you go. Okay, the last thing that we're going to talk about with Premiere is just exporting. So let's say we have everything where we want it. We have our audio fading in, fading out. We've green screened. We've keyed the video, taken out the green screen, put a background behind it, have some text coming in here, and a little, I don't know, a really bad outro, I guess. And we're ready to export. So just make sure that the timeline is selected down here. There's that blue box around it. We can go up to File and Export Media. Here where it says Output Name, if we just click on that, we can change the name of it. Let's say we want to export it to the desktop. We can change the name to Final Project, I don't know. Hit Save, and make sure it's H.264. It's going to match the source, the highest bit rate there. This will save it as an MP4, which is what we want, and then we just hit Export. And since this is a very short video, it's not going to take very long. And there you go. If I minimize that, you can see there's our Final Project MP4. We can play it. Really bad. Did not take a lot of time with that, but there it is. That's all the stuff that you'll need to know in the midterm for Premiere.